This is the moment a car going over 130 miles an hour ran a red light and killed an innocent driver.
In the early hours of March 9, 2026, cameras in South Manchester captured a Volkswagen Golf GTI racing through the streets at speeds no car should ever reach on residential roads. Inside the car were 20-year-old Uwais Hussein and 23-year-old Usman Mahmoud. The Golf belonged to Mahmoud, but Hussein was behind the wheel. Neither of them were insured to drive it. And what started as reckless driving soon turned into what police later described as one of the most extreme, dangerous driving cases they had ever seen. Earlier that night, the two men had stopped at a petrol station. CCTV showed them using nitrous oxide from a balloon before getting back into the car and continuing through the streets of South Manchester. But they were not just driving fast, they were filming it.
A lot of evidence gathered during the investigation comes from the two men themselves. Several videos on their phones shows Hussein, the driver, zooming in on the speedometer, which clocks speeds of over 100 miles an hour. Footage from the passenger seat shows them running red lights and passing cars at incredible speed. They also brag about inhaling balloons throughout.
At some points, they reached more than 130 miles per hour. And seconds before the crash, the car was recorded traveling at 139 miles per hour. At the same time, 50-year-old Sylvester Abayomi was simply driving to work. He was known to loved ones as Sil. He worked as a delivery driver, and that morning was supposed to be like any other. He was not racing. He was not involved in what Hussein and Mahmoud were doing. He was just on the road at the same time as them. Then, as the Golf raced down Kingsway, Hussein went through a red light. Sylvester was driving through the junction when the Golf smashed into his car. The impact was catastrophic, but what happened after the crash made the case even worse. Hussein and Mahmoud did not stay to help. They did not show concern for the man they had just hit. Instead, they continued driving, reversed down the road, and parked up nearby. What they did not realize was that Hussein's Apple Watch had detected the crash and automatically called emergency services. And because of that, their conversation was being recorded.
Hello?
Fucking Uber Rapid, get out of here.
The owner of this Apple Watch was in a
What is
serious
stolen?
car crash and is not...
What is stolen? Fucking Uber, fucking Uber, get out of here, man. Fucking Uber, get out of here. Oh, where, boy? You just wrapped my window. Fucking Uber, man. Fucking Uber. You think the guy's alive?
They talked about leaving the scene, removing evidence, and even claiming the car had been stolen. Nearby CCTV later also showed them removing nitrous oxide canisters from the back of the car. All of this was happening while Sylvester Abayomi was fatally injured. Police were able to track Hussein through the Apple Watch. When officers found the pair, they ran in opposite directions, but both were caught and arrested shortly afterward. In court, Judge Nicholas Dean KC described their driving as deliberate risk-taking, seemingly for the thrill of it. He said the footage showed a sustained and escalating course of dangerous conduct over a prolonged period, with speeds reaching nearly 140 miles per hour on roads meant for 30. Hussein admitted causing death by dangerous driving, causing death by driving while uninsured, and failing to provide a specimen. He was sentenced to 11 years and 8 months. Mahmoud admitted aiding and abetting, causing death by dangerous driving, and aiding and abetting, causing death by driving while uninsured. He was sentenced to 12 years and 9 months. Police said it was believed to be one of the first times in the UK that a passenger had been convicted for aiding and abetting causing death by dangerous driving. But no sentence could undo what happened to Sylvester.
It'll never go away. My spark's different. It's not. And it doesn't matter because it'll never be the same anyway, and this pain I feel won't go away. My Sils passed away in the car when they could have gone over to him just to make, I don't know whether he was awake, shock and then gone, I don't know, I'll never know. But they could have gone to be with him so he wouldn't be on his own. But they didn't even do that.
His partner, Denise, said he was simply on his way to work. An ordinary, hard-working man who should have come home safely that day. Instead, his final moments were caused by two men treating a public road like a game, filming themselves, chasing speed, and then trying to run from the consequences when that game killed someone. And from there, we move to another moment where everything changed in seconds. On July 4th, 2022, security cameras inside a fireworks warehouse in Harris County, Texas, captured three men walking into the store just before 10:30 at night. At first, they looked like ordinary customers, but almost immediately, their behavior started to stand out. One of the men, wearing a number 90 jersey, picked up a firework from an end cap and walked into the middle of an aisle. Shoppers were still nearby, browsing the shelves, with no idea what he was about to do. He looked over his shoulder. Then he lit the fuse and ran. Seconds later, the firework ignited in the middle of the store, sending sparks across the floor as people jumped back and scattered from the aisle. For a moment, the entire warehouse was at risk. This was not a small store with a few boxes on the shelves. It was a fireworks warehouse, packed with products that could have created a much larger chain reaction if the fire had spread. Some customers ran for the exits, others moved toward the fire and tried to stomp it out. At first, it looked like they might not be able to stop it. The sparks kept spreading and the firework continued burning in the aisle. But then, just before it could reach more products, someone managed to extinguish it. That quick reaction may have stopped the entire warehouse from going up. During the chaos, the three men reportedly stole around $200 worth of fireworks and left the store. One of the suspects, 28-year-old Alex Herrera, was later charged with arson, while the other two men were still being sought at the time of reporting. What makes the footage so frustrating is how unnecessary the entire thing was. It was not just theft, it was not just vandalism. It was someone lighting fireworks in a crowded warehouse with families and shoppers standing only a few feet away. And if the people inside had not reacted as quickly as they did, a few seconds of reckless behavior could have turned into something far worse than a robbery. And that brings us to this next shocking moment caught on camera. On March 15, 2017, security cameras inside Noah's Ark Companion Animal Hospital in Franklin, North Carolina, captured a normal workday turning into complete chaos. Inside the business office, staff members were working at their desks while 4 dogs rested nearby. Normally, 4 employees worked in that space, but at that exact moment, 2 of them were out running errands. That small detail may have prevented the accident from becoming much worse. Outside the building, a client was trying to park, but instead of pressing the brake, she accidentally stepped on the gas. The car jumped forward, drove through the garden, and crashed straight through the wall of the animal hospital. Inside, there was no time for anyone to move. The vehicle slammed into the office, sending furniture, debris, and parts of the wall flying across the room. One employee, the office manager, was struck and thrown across the office before being pinned under the wreckage. For a moment, it looked like the crash had hit everything in its path. But then, almost immediately, the staff began to move. The office manager managed to free herself from the debris and placed a call to 911. Other employees rushed toward the damaged office to check on everyone inside, including that luck. On February 8, 2023, surveillance cameras in East Baltimore captured a police stop turning into a deadly collapse. That night, officers attempted to stop a stolen Hyundai being driven by 33-year-old Sean Lee Brunson. But instead of stopping, Brunson sped away. Within moments, he reached the intersection of East North Avenue and North Wolf Street. At the same time, 54-year-old Alfred Fincher was walking along North Avenue. He was not involved in the chase. He was not inside either vehicle. He was simply a pedestrian standing near the corner at the worst possible moment. Then, Brunson ran a red light. The stolen Hyundai slammed into another car in the intersection. The force of the collision sent both vehicles spinning toward the sidewalk, directly toward Alfred and the vacant building behind him. The cars struck Alfred first, then they crashed into the building. a second, the structure seemed to hold. But then the front of the building gave way, collapsing down onto the vehicles and burying Alfred beneath the rubble. Officers and first responders began digging through the rubble, trying to reach anyone buried beneath the collapsed wall. Pieces of brick, wood, and dust cover the cars. What had started as a traffic stop had become a rescue scene in the middle of the street. Five people from the vehicles were injured and taken to the hospital. But Alfred Fincher could not be saved. He was pulled from the rubble and pronounced dead at the scene. The case later raised questions because the crash happened after an attempted police stop, and the Maryland Attorney General's Independent Investigations Division reviewed the incident. But the footage also made one thing painfully clear. Alfred was not part of any of it. He was just walking nearby when a stolen car ran a red light and turned an entire building into a weapon. In 2024, Sean Lee Brunson was sentenced to 29 years, 4 months, and 24 days in prison for charges including vehicular manslaughter, theft, and driving without a license. But the sentence could not change what the cameras had captured. A man walking through East Baltimore was killed not only by a crash, but by everything that happened in the seconds after it, when the building behind him collapsed and buried him under the street. And that brings us to a clip where timing made all the difference. On October 15, 2019, security cameras at Pueyrredon Station in Buenos Aires, Argentina, captured a bizarre accident during a busy commute. The platform was crowded with passengers waiting for the subway. At first, nothing about the scene looked unusual. People were standing close together near the edge of the platform, watching the tracks as the train approached. But then, in the middle of the platform, a man suddenly lost consciousness. As he fainted, he fell forward and accidentally crashed into a woman standing near the edge. She had no time to react. In one moment, she was waiting with everyone else. In the next, she was knocked off balance and fell directly onto the tracks, lifted her back onto the platform while others made space and pulled her up from above. At the same time, the man who had fainted was also helped to his feet. What makes the footage stand out is how accidental the entire moment was. There was no argument, no attacker, and no one trying to hurt her. It was one passenger fainting at the worst possible time, next to someone standing just inches from the edge. The woman survived, and the train driver managed to stop before impact. But the footage shows how quickly an ordinary moment on a crowded platform can turn serious, and how fast a group of strangers reacted when there was no time to wait for help. It seems that sometimes, the most disturbing footage is the kind that almost looks normal at first. On July 19, 2022, security cameras on a highway in Zibo, China, captured traffic moving normally just before everything changed. A red box truck entered the frame and began drifting toward the right side of the road. At first, it looked like the driver may have been distracted or losing control. Then the truck suddenly swerved left. The sharp movement caused it to flip onto its side and slide across several lanes of traffic. For a split second, it looked like a serious crash on its own. Then the explosion happened. A massive fireball erupted across the highway, covering multiple lanes and forcing surrounding vehicles to stop almost instantly. Flames and thick smoke filled the road as debris scattered across the scene. One of the vehicles closest to the blast disappeared behind the fire and smoke, making it impossible at first to know what had happened to the people inside. The explosion was strong enough to launch debris across the highway, including a tire from the wreckage that nearly struck another passing car. Fire and rescue crews later arrived to control the blaze and search the scene. According to reports, the truck was carrying plastic pellets and bleach when it crashed. Both the truck and another vehicle were badly damaged in the fire, but local reports said miraculously both drivers managed to escape. The footage stands out because of how quickly the scene changes. Traffic is moving normally. Cars are passing like any other day. Then one truck loses control, and within seconds, The entire highway is swallowed by flames. But sometimes, the camera catches the moment right before everything falls apart. On January 24, 2006, 24-year-old Jennifer Kessie vanished from Orlando, Florida, without a trace. What made her disappearance so disturbing is that Jennifer was not careless. She was the kind of person who thought about her safety constantly. She carried pepper spray. She called people while walking through dark parking lots. She had chosen to live at the Mosaic at Millennia, a gated condominium complex, because it was supposed to feel safer. But none of those precautions mattered. Jennifer had just returned from a vacation in the Virgin Islands with her boyfriend Rob. She was happy, recently promoted, and settling back into her normal routine. And part of that routine was predictable. Every morning before work, she would call or text Rob. He later described it almost like an alarm clock, because she was that consistent. But that morning, the call never came. Between 8 and 9 a.m., Rob tried calling her again and again. Every call went straight to voicemail. At first, it may have seemed strange but not impossible. Maybe she was busy. Maybe she was running late. But by mid-morning, Jennifer's employer contacted her parents. Jennifer had not shown up to work, and for someone as responsible as her, that was completely out of character. Her parents contacted the manager of her condominium complex and asked him to check her apartment. The door was locked from the outside. Inside, nothing looked obviously wrong. There were signs that Jennifer had been home that morning and had gotten ready for work. But her car was gone. Her phone was gone. Her keys, purse, and other personal items were missing. And that is where the mystery began. At the time, the Mosaic at Millennia was still partly under construction. Workers moved around the complex freely, and some were even living in empty units. Jennifer had told people before that some of the workers made her uncomfortable. She said they would stare at her, make comments, and stop what they were doing when she walked by. 2 days after Jennifer disappeared, police located her black 2004 Chevy Malibu at another apartment complex about a mile away. A resident had recognized the car from news reports, and when investigators checked surveillance footage from the area, they found the most important clue in the entire case. The camera had captured someone parking Jennifer's car and walking away. The person was clearly not Jennifer. They sat inside the vehicle briefly before getting out, as if they may have been wiping something down or making sure nothing was left behind. Then they walked past a row of fence posts. And that is what made the footage so frustrating. The camera only captured an image every few seconds. And somehow, in every frame where the person's face should have been visible, a fence post blocked it. Not once, not twice, every single time. It was the kind of footage that felt like it came inches away from solving the case, only to miss the one thing everyone needed to see. Investigators tried to work with what they had. The FBI helped estimate the person's height, and the clothing appeared to resemble something a painter or worker might wear. But the footage was too grainy, and the face was never clear enough to identify. Even with outside help and image enhancement, the person remained unknown. Search dogs later traced a scent from the abandoned car back toward Jennifer's condominium complex. Witnesses also reported seeing a car like Jennifer's swerving out of the parking lot that morning, almost as if someone inside was struggling for control. But the vehicle itself offered very little. There was no clear blood evidence, no definitive DNA hit, and nothing that could finally explain what happened. Over the years, Jennifer's family kept fighting for answers. They pushed for records, hired private investigators, and refused to let the case disappear. In 2016, Jennifer was legally declared dead, but her family never stopped searching for her. And what makes this case so haunting is not only that Jennifer vanished, it is that the camera almost caught the person who may have known the truth. A single surveillance system recorded the driver. A few seconds separated each frame. A row of fence posts stood in exactly the wrong place. And because of that, one of the most important faces in the case became one of the most infamous unknown figures ever caught on CCTV. Nearly 2 decades later, no one has been arrested. Jennifer Kessie has never been found. and the person seen walking away from her car is still unidentified. The footage did not solve the case. It only showed how close the truth came to being captured. But the next clip shows how one person's mistake can put everyone around them in danger. A woman driving a rented car tried to tell police that another driver had forced her off the road, but the camera inside the car told a different story. The footage shows her behind the wheel moments before the crash. Instead of keeping her eyes on the road, she appears distracted, looking down as the car continues forward. Then, before she can correct it, the vehicle leaves the road and crashes head-on into a mailbox. At first, she claimed the accident was not her fault, but what she did not realize was that the rental car had been recording the entire time. The car had been rented through Turo, a platform often described as Airbnb for cars. According to reports, the vehicle was equipped with both interior and exterior cameras, and the owner had made her aware of them before the rental. After the footage went viral, the woman reportedly sued, claiming she had been recorded illegally. But for most people watching, the most disturbing part was not the camera. It was how quickly a distracted moment behind the wheel could have become something much worse. The crash only hit a mailbox. But if a person, another car, or a cyclist had been in that same spot, the ending could have been completely different. The footage did not show a massive collision. It showed something much more common: a driver looking away for just a few seconds, then trying to explain what happened before realizing the camera had already answered the question. And that brings us to a moment where the footage becomes harder to watch once you know the outcome. On February 1st, 2021, security cameras at an apartment building in Canton, Massachusetts, captured 23-year-old Sandra Birchmore alive for the last time. That afternoon, Sandra was seen around her apartment building, picking up a DoorDash order and going back inside. To anyone watching the footage later, it looked completely ordinary. A young woman returning to her apartment. A normal winter evening. Nothing that seemed like it was about to become the final hours of her life. But 3 days later, Sandra's co-workers at Sharon Public Schools became worried. She had not shown up for work. She was not answering her phone. Police went to her apartment for a welfare check. When officers forced their way inside, they found Sandra dead. At first, her death was ruled a suicide, but Sandra's family never believed that. She was pregnant. She had been buying baby supplies. There was a car seat still in its box. Wet laundry was left in the washing machine. And near her body, her family noticed something that did not sit right with them: a broken necklace. According to relatives, Sandra wore that necklace constantly. To them, the apartment did not look like a woman preparing to end her life. It looked like a life that had been interrupted, and the more people looked into Sandra's past, the darker the case became. Sandra had known Matthew Farwell for years. He was a Stoughton police officer, and according to federal prosecutors, their relationship began when Sandra was still involved in the Stoughton Police Explorers Program, a youth program connected to law enforcement. Prosecutors allege that Farwell used his position to exploit her over a long period of time. By early 2021, Sandra was pregnant and wanted Farwell to be involved. But Farwell had a separate life. He was married, had children, and his wife was also expecting a baby. To Sandra's family and to federal investigators, her pregnancy became a turning point. On January 20th, just days before Sandra died, one of her friends contacted the Stoughton Police Department to report Farwell's relationship with her. According to prosecutors, Farwell learned about that report, and from that moment, investigators believe he had a reason to fear that everything he had done could finally come out. Then came the security footage. On the evening of February 1st, cameras captured a man arriving at Sandra's apartment building. Prosecutors say that man was Matthew Farwell. He was dressed in heavy winter clothing, with his face covered. He entered the building and stayed for about 30 minutes. Then he left. Sandra was never seen alive again. Only hours later, Farwell's wife gave birth at a Boston hospital. For years, Sandra's death remained officially treated as a suicide, even though her family kept insisting something was wrong. They hired experts. They pushed back. They pointed to the baby items, the broken necklace, and Sandra's excitement about becoming a mother. A former New York City medical examiner reviewed the case and concluded that Sandra's death was consistent with homicide by strangulation, not suicide. Still, no criminal charges came at first. Then a major investigation by the Boston Globe brought renewed attention to the case. The FBI reopened it, and in August 2024, federal prosecutors arrested Matthew Farwell and charged him in connection with Sandra's death. According to the federal indictment, Farwell allegedly killed Sandra by strangulation and staged the apartment to make it appear as if she had taken her own life. Prosecutors say he did it to prevent law enforcement from learning about his alleged exploitation of Sandra and the relationship that had begun when she was young. Farwell has pleaded not guilty and is awaiting trial. But what makes this case so disturbing is how close the truth may have been from the beginning. There was footage. There was a timeline. There was a man entering Sandra's building shortly before she died. There was a family saying over and over again that Sandra would not have done this. And yet for years, the case was closed as a suicide. The cameras did not capture the full truth inside Sandra's apartment, but they captured enough to raise the question her family never stopped asking. If Sandra Birchmore did not take her own life, why did it take so long for anyone to listen? And that question brings us to the final case in this video. On May 25, 2008, security cameras inside the First State Bank in Parkersburg, Iowa, captured the moment an EF5 tornado tore directly through the town. Parkersburg was a small community in Butler County with just over 2,000 residents. It was the kind of place where most people knew each other and where a normal Sunday afternoon was not supposed to end with the town being ripped apart. But that afternoon, a violent tornado formed southwest of the city and began moving toward Parkersburg. The National Weather Service later rated it EF5, with estimated winds up to 205 miles per hour. Inside the bank, the first signs were subtle. Papers started shifting. Objects moved across desks. The lights flickered as the pressure changed and the storm got closer. Then the building started coming apart. From one camera angle, loose papers and debris suddenly filled the room. From another, a window blew out and furniture was thrown across the office. The security cameras continued recording as walls were damaged, desks were destroyed, and the force of the tornado ripped through the building. One camera after another was overtaken by debris until the feeds disappeared. The tornado carved a path of destruction through Parkersburg and nearby New Hartford, damaging or destroying homes, businesses, schools, and entire neighborhoods. 9 people were killed, and dozens more were injured. What makes the bank footage so rare is that it shows the storm from the inside. Most tornado videos are filmed from a distance, from storm chasers, vehicles, or people watching the funnel approach. But these cameras were inside one of the buildings being hit. They captured the moment a normal office turned into a room full of flying debris, seconds before the cameras themselves were destroyed. By the time the storm moved on, much of Parkersburg had been changed forever, and the footage from inside the bank became one of the clearest examples of what an EF5 tornado actually looks like when there is nowhere left to run. That's all for today, folks. If you'd like to see more of this creepy content, click on the video on screen.